So when we're talking about civil rights as opposed to civil liberties, we're talking about equality for the group, making sure that no one person, regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sex, sexual orientation, all of those sort of demographic belonging to a group, that you are not denied access to equal protection under the law, that you're not denied the right to vote, that you're not denied the right to everything in the public sphere guaranteed by the government. And in particular, those provided by the government, the right to vote, the right to be elected, the right to everything in the public sphere. So this should, of course, have been decided long ago with the passage of the 14th Amendment after the Civil War, where we abolish slavery and grant the right to vote to all men, and the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection of the law, that everyone will be treated the same under the law. But of course, it takes decades after that before we get the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement, which gets, equal access to schools, equal access to the right to vote, equal access for all of those factors. There were a lot of discriminations going on throughout the country. And so that starts the movement to demand equality. And we still have, as much as people talk about, this post-racial America, that there is still clear institutional racism. And society can provide racist outcomes even when they don't intend to. And so when we look at police brutality cases and the court system that, incarcerates the poor and minorities at a far greater rate than other groups, when we look at employment access, when we look at schools, when we look at socioeconomic factors versus race, there is institutional racism that still exists far beyond the law. And that's one thing to consider, is that there's two types of discrimination. There is de facto discrimination, which is that discrimination occurs. As a matter of fact, discrimination occurs. But there's also de jure discrimination. That's using the law to discriminate. And we have, for the most part, done a pretty good job of getting rid of discrimination by law. The 14th Amendment, the Equal Opportunity Office, the court system will strike down laws that are blatantly discriminatory. That's the easy part. The easy part is getting rid of racism and discrimination using the law. The tougher part that we're still struggling with and will continue to struggle with is discrimination in society, discrimination that occurs. And that's harder, somewhat complicated, because we value freedom and we value liberty. And the tough part about that is we also have to protect the right of people to hate whoever they want. And so we end up with this double-edged sword of civil liberties and civil rights, because people hate other people. People discriminate against other people. People are prejudiced. And that ends up being part of society. And so it is much more difficult to get rid of that type of discrimination. And that's what we still struggle with. It's not that, anyone is proclaiming that the law is outright discriminatory. Just like when we talk about pay inequity, there's no law that says, CEOs can pay women less. But the reality is the de facto pay inequity is that women often get paid less for the same job. and we'll talk about the factors that contribute to that. But it's beyond just a question of racism. It's a question of how our society treats different types of people, and that is insidious, and it's hard to get rid of. And so, can you have segregated proms? Well, of course the answer is no. You can't, by law, have segregated proms and say the black students go to this prom and the white students go to another prom. But the reality is that in a number of states, a number of school districts, a number of schools, still today, there are, in essence, segregated proms. Now, how does that happen? It's not the school district setting that out. The school district, the school, the students, the associated students puts on a prom, and then parents or students that don't want to attend that prom schedule a private party the same day and only invite their friends, and so you end up with competing proms, but only one of them is official. Only one of them is officially the prom. And the question then becomes, can you do anything about it? If a group of white, rich parents want to plan a separate event on the same day as the school-sanctioned prom, and only invite their friends, is there anything legally wrong about that? No. There's something morally wrong. There's something ethically wrong. There's something, just that feels wrong about the idea that you are specifically planning a party so that your white children don't associate with other students. But there's nothing illegal about it. And so we still today have segregated proms, and we have segregated schools. In fact, we have more segregated schools today than we had prior to Brown versus Board of Education. And I won't belabor the point because John Oliver does a much better job about it. But segregation is not getting better. And part of that is because of the way we select schools geographically. And so if you live in a rich area, your kids will go to school in that neighborhood school. But watch the John Oliver clip to learn more about that, because it is a huge problem for our society that we have this segregation going on. Can you ban Muslims from entering the United States? Donald Trump, in one of his first acts as president, was to have a Muslim ban. And the answer is the courts so far have upheld and said, no, you can't have a Muslim ban. What you can have is a ban on visitors from a particular country, if a particular country is problematic. And so it's sort of been edited and revised so that the ban is not against a religion, which is obviously a First Amendment problem, but from a point of origin, so a particular country, and the countries that have been chosen are primarily Muslim. So getting around that a little bit. So this question of equal protection under the law and who is treated fairly, are there racial profiling of people who look Muslim or people from Muslim countries, is same-sex couples, and it's far beyond the question of just marriage and equality, but also what laws are there to protect them. And a number of states do not have workplace protection for people who are homosexual, and so they can be fired for those reasons. The map here is, you can be fired in these states, there's no protection for being fired for sexual orientation or gender identity. And so some have all employment and some have protection for just state employment. But there's a lot of states in the country that don't have any protections at all. So there's still a long way to go when it comes to equality. And I'll put up some videos that kind of tell the story a lot better than I do with better production value. But civil rights is an ongoing issue that we all need to be aware of.